Some folks believe choosing is the easy part, but they have never stood before a whole town with their pride bleeding through their clothes. The truest choices are rarely made when the road is smooth. They are made when everyone else has turned away and one soul decides to remain. That was how it happened in Bitterroot Crossing in the autumn of 1880, when 7 men walked off and left Abigail Newcomb standing beside a cedar trunk painted with 7 blue swallows. The first man moved before the church bell finished striking 11. He stepped backward from Abigail on the courthouse porch, nearly catching his heel on the top stair. His hat twisted between his hands, shedding rainwater onto the boards. "I was not told about the children," he said. Eli Newcomb stood below the porch with his fists shoved into the pockets of a coat too small for him. He was 9 years old and thin enough that the wind seemed able to bend him. Beside him, 6-year-old Ruthie held the handle of Abigail's cedar trunk, as though the painted swallows might fly away if she let go. Abigail did not look at either child. She kept her chin level. "They are my brother and sister," she said. "They remain with me." The man glanced toward the crowd gathered in the muddy square. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered behind a gloved hand. "I wanted a wife," he muttered, "not a ready-made burden." He descended the courthouse steps and disappeared beneath the awning of the mercantile. That was one. The second man studied the pale burn scar that curved from Abigail's left temple to the corner of her jaw. He hadn't already known about it. The advertisement placed in the Boise newspaper had described her honestly. 27 years of age, competent with livestock, accounts, bread ovens, and medicines, seeking a lawful marriage with a sober man of good character. It had not described the way a burn scar looked in cold daylight. "I reckon we would not suit," he said. Then he walked away. "Before we follow Abigail any farther, tell us where you are listening from tonight. And if this old frontier memory touches something in you, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps these stories travel to another lonely porch, another quiet room, and another heart that might need them." The third man lasted less than a minute. The fourth asked whether Eli could be sent to work for a mining company. The fifth wanted Abigail but not Ruthie. The sixth had smelled of whiskey before breakfast. Abigail dismissed him herself. By then rain had gathered along the brim of her brown felt hat and dripped steadily onto the shoulders of her gray traveling coat. The cedar trunk rested at her feet, its brass latch green with age, its lid painted long ago by her mother. 7 blue swallows crossed the wood from left to right, each bird no larger than a silver dollar. Abigail's mother used to say a swallow always remembered the road home. The 7th man was named Hollis Crane. He had come all the way from Oregon, and for 3 weeks his letters had been the kindest. He had written that he did not fear hard work. He had said scars were only proof that the body had refused to surrender. He had asked the names of the children and promised Ruthie a red ribbon when they met. Now he stood before Abigail in a fine black coat, looking past her at the banker near the courthouse door. Harlan Pike gave the smallest shake of his head. Abigail saw it. Hollis saw that she saw. His face reddened. "I have reconsidered," he said, "because of my father's debt." The crowd became very still. Hollis looked at the wet boards. "I was informed this morning that the Newcomb property carries obligations beyond what your letter stated." "My letter stated every dollar recorded in the county ledger." "Then perhaps the county ledger is mistaken. Or perhaps Mr. County Ledger is mistaken." Pike added something after you arrived. Banker Pike's smile had no warmth in it. "Careful, Miss Newcomb." Abigail turned toward him. "I have been careful for 8 years. It has not made you honest." A murmur passed through the crowd. Hollis Crane stepped down from the porch. He did not give Ruthie the red ribbon. 7 men had come to Bitterroot Crossing to consider Abigail Newcomb as a wife. 7 men had walked away before noon. The town stood watching as though rejection were a traveling show brought in for the harvest fair. Abigail heard Eli sniff beneath the stairs. She wanted to go to him. She wanted to put her arms around both children, carry this cedar trunk back to the boarding house, shut the curtains, and never let another human being examine her as though she were a lame horse at auction. Instead, she removed her gloves finger by finger. She faced Reverend Sloane, who stood with a marriage book tucked beneath one arm. "I believe your services will not be needed," she said. The Reverend's kind old face tightened with shame. "Miss Newcomb, I am deeply sorry. You did not send them away." No, she looked toward Harlan Pike. The banker's silver watch chain lay bright across his waistcoat. The watch had belonged to Abigail's father before the debt began swallowing everything he had left behind. "No," she said. "You did not?" Ruthie's small hand slipped into hers. "Are we going home now?" Abigail looked across the square toward the narrow false front building that had once been her father's feed store. Home had been painted on a board over the back room by Eli when he was 5. Pike would take the building in 9 days unless Abigail paid $840. She knew they did not owe. "Yes," she told Ruthie. "We are going home." A boot struck the bottom courthouse step out. The sound was not loud, but every voice in the square died. The man standing there wore a long black coat darkened by rain. He was taller than any of the 7 who had come before him, broad across the shoulders, with a face cut into hard lines by wind and sun. A narrow scar crossed his right eyebrow. Another disappeared beneath the collar of his shirt. His hat cast a shadow over eyes, the color of flint. His gun rode low against his thigh. Not the polished weapon of a town dandy. The grip was worn smooth. The leather holster had been repaired twice with rawhide stitching. Someone near the hitching rail whispered his name. Quentin Mercer. The name moved through the square faster than the rain. Quentin Mercer had come north from Texas 6 years earlier with a herd of longhorns and a reputation no one could separate from blood. Men said he had killed 3 cattle thieves at Red Draw. Others swore it had been 5. He owned the Black Horse Ranch beyond Cottonwood Pass, employed riders who spoke little, and came into town only when he needed salt, ammunition, or a blacksmith. Children had been warned not to wander near his land. Women lowered their voices when he entered a store. Grown men watched his right hand. Quentin climbed the courthouse steps. Abigail did not move. He stopped beside the cedar trunk and looked first at Eli, then at Ruthie, then at Abigail. His gaze rested for a moment on the burned scar along her cheek. There was no pity in his face. There was no disgust either. "What do you want?" Abigail asked. His voice was low and roughened by years of dust. "A wife." Laughter broke from somewhere near the saloon. Quentin turned his head. The laughter stopped. He faced Abigail again. "I came because Reverend Sloane sent word there would be a woman here willing to consider a practical marriage. There were 7 such men ahead of you. I counted. And you waited until they finished." "I did." "Why?" "Wanted to see what made them leave. And they were weak." Hollis Crane had not yet reached the edge of the square. He spun around. "You have no cause to insult us." Quentin looked at him. "You walked away from a woman because a banker frowned." Hollis's mouth opened, but nothing came. Quentin turned back to Abigail. "I own 4,000 acres, 800 head of cattle, a house with a sound roof, and too many empty rooms. I drink coffee, not whiskey. I have never struck a woman or child. I do not attend church regular, and I have killed men." The rain ticked against the courthouse roof. Abigail studied him. "Were they armed?" "Most of them. Most." "One was reaching. For what?" "I never found out." A faint muscle moved in his jaw. It was the first sign that the story caused him anything. Abigail glanced at Reverend Sloane. "Is he making an offer?" "I believe he is," Quentin said. "I am." Harlan Pike stepped forward. "Mercer, you do understand Miss Newcomb brings considerable debt." Quentin did not look at him. "Wasn't speaking to you." Pike's cheeks colored. Abigail drew a slow breath. "You do not know me. No, you do not know whether I am gentle, no, or obedient." His eyes shifted briefly toward the 7 men scattered around the square. "I had not counted on obedient. A few people smiled despite themselves. Abigail did not. My brother and sister remain with me. They eat at my table. They attend school. Eli is not hired out, and Ruthie is not sent away when she becomes inconvenient. Quentin looked down at the children. Agreed. I keep my own name on any property that was my father's. Agreed. I will not be ordered into your bed because a preacher signs a page. A woman in the crowd gasped. Quentin's face did not change. Agreed. You have agreed too quickly. I know the value of plain terms. And what do you expect in return? Honesty. Work. No whiskey in the house. No lies about money. If you decide you cannot remain after winter, I will bring you back to town with enough cash to begin elsewhere. She watched him closely. You are offering an escape before I have accepted. I don't lock doors against people leaving. The sentence landed more heavily than he seemed to intend. For the first time, Abigail wondered what empty rooms waited at Black Horse Ranch, and who had once walked through them. Harlan Pike came down one step. This spectacle has gone far enough. Miss Newcomb, you cannot erase a debt by attaching yourself to a man with a gun. Quentin finally looked at him. I choose Abigail Newcomb. He said it without raising his voice. The words traveled across the square all the same. He did not say he would take her. He did not say he would rescue her. He said he chose her. Abigail felt Ruthie's fingers tighten around hers. Quentin went on looking at Pike. I choose the children with her. I choose whatever debt is lawful. I choose to hear the rest from her, not from a man wearing another fellow's watch. Pike's hand flew to the silver chain. The crowd murmured again. Abigail stared at Quentin. No one had noticed the watch except her. No one had cared enough to notice. She looked at the 7 blue swallows on the cedar trunk, blurred beneath the rain. Then she faced the most feared cowboy in 3 territories. I have not chosen you yet, she said. Something almost like approval entered his eyes. No, ma'am. Reverend Sloane cleared his throat. Perhaps we might continue this discussion inside. Abigail shook her head. No. It began before the town. Let it finish before the town. She studied Quentin's worn gun belt, his patched glove, the thin white scar near his collar. She saw no softness in him, but she saw a restraint. In a place where every man had explained what she lacked, Quentin Mercer had answered what she asked. What is the first thing you do when you wake? She said. He seemed surprised by the question. Feed my horse. Before coffee. Yes. What is her name? Solitude. Do you beat her? His eyes hardened. No. What do you do when you are angry? Get quiet. That can be worse than shouting. I know. Can you apologize? A long pause followed. Not well. Can you learn? Another pause. Yes. Abigail looked down at Eli. He tried to appear brave, but his lower lip was trembling. What do you think? She asked. Eli glanced at Quentin's gun. Does he have wolves? Some, Quentin said. Do they come near the house? When hungry. Can I learn to shoot when you're older? Eli frowned. How much older? Old enough to understand a gun is a last answer, not a first one. Eli considered that. Then Ruthie spoke. Do you have hens? No, why not? They died, all of them. A fox. You did not build the fence right. Quentin looked at her for a long moment. Seems I did not. Ruthie nodded as though the matter were settled. Abigail turned to Reverend Sloane. Open your book. They married beneath the courthouse roof while rain washed the mud from the steps. Reverend Sloane's hands shook as he read. Eli stood at Abigail's right, Ruthie at her left. Quentin removed his gun belt before taking Abigail's hand and laid it on the rail where the whole town could see. His palm was warm and rough. Her fingers were cold. When the Reverend asked whether he would honor, protect, and keep her, Quentin said, I will. When he asked Abigail whether she would do the same, she looked into the face of a stranger feared by nearly everyone present. I will try honestly, she said. Reverend Sloane closed his eyes for one heartbeat. That might be the most truthful vow I have heard. Quentin did not kiss her. He picked up her cedar trunk, carried it down the courthouse steps, and placed it in the back of his wagon. That was the first kindness he gave her. He did not behave as though it purchased another. The road to Black Horse Ranch climbed west through wet pine country, then crossed a high shoulder of land where the first snow had already gathered in the shadows. Quentin drove. Abigail sat beside him beneath a canvas lap robe, with Ruthie pressed against her side and Eli riding in the back among sacks of flour, seed potatoes, lamp oil, and the cedar trunk. Quentin spoke only when the road demanded warning. Wash out a hat, low branch. Hold the child. By late afternoon, the rain had turned to sleet. Abigail's gloves were damp through. She kept her hands tucked beneath the robe, but Quentin noticed. Without looking at her, he removed his right glove and handed it across. One glove will not help two hands, she said. Put both hands in it. What will you wear? My left? That is foolish. Yes. She put both hands into the one large glove. It smelled of leather, horse, and cold iron. The Black Horse Ranch appeared near sunset, a dark house set against the white shoulders of the mountains. The roof was broad and sound, as Quentin had promised. The porch sagged in the middle. A barn leaned out of the wind behind a row of cottonwoods. Beyond it, cattle moved like black stones beneath a gray sky. No smoke came from the chimney. Quentin's foreman rode out to meet them. Silas Vane was a narrow man with pale eyes and a mustache that drooped over the corners of his mouth. You brought company, he said. My wife, Quentin answered. Silas looked at Abigail, then at the children. His surprise became displeasure before he covered it. Didn't know you were shopping for one. I wasn't. Silas glanced toward the cedar trunk. Town must have been giving things away. Quentin climbed down from the wagon. He did it slowly. Silas' smile vanished. Mrs. Mercer, he said. Mrs. Newcomb, Abigail corrected. For now. Silas touched two fingers to his hat. Quentin lifted Ruthie from the wagon, then reached for Abigail. She stepped down without his help. The front door opened into a long room smelling of cold ashes, dust, and old tobacco. A stone fireplace filled one wall. The furniture was heavy and dark. A rough pine table stood near the kitchen end, scattered with branding tallies, cartridges, a broken harness buckle, and 3 unwashed tin plates. Ruthie stared. Where do you eat? Quentin looked at the table. There, on the bullets. He gathered the cartridges into his hand. Not anymore. The kitchen stove held no fire. Abigail opened the wood box, empty. She glanced at Quentin. He removed his coat. I will bring wood. I will help, Eli said quickly. Quentin looked him over. You can carry kindling. I can carry logs. You can carry kindling without dropping it on your foot. Eli bristled, but he followed Quentin outside. Abigail found a broom behind the pantry door. Half its straw had worn away. She tied her apron over her traveling dress and began at the center of the room. Ruthie watched her. Are we staying for tonight? Are we married for tonight? We are married unless the law changes while we sleep. Will he be here in the morning? Abigail paused. Through the window, Quentin crossed the yard with 2 logs balanced against his shoulder. Eli hurried behind him carrying an armful of twigs. Snow caught in Quentin's dark hair where his hat had shifted. Yes, Abigail said. He will be here. She did not yet know how much the answer mattered to the child. They ate fried salt pork, potatoes, and biscuits that first night. Abigail discarded the rancid flour from an open sack and used a smaller bag she had brought from town. Quentin sat at the head of the table. Eli and Ruthie sat together on the bench. Abigail took the chair farthest from Quentin. No one spoke for several minutes. The biscuits were hard because the oven heat had been uneven. Quentin ate too. These are poor, Abigail said. Their food, I know the difference. He took a third. That was not praise, exactly. It was close enough for the first night. After supper, Quentin showed Abigail the upstairs rooms. There were 4 bedrooms. One had belonged to his parents. One held a narrow bed and a washstand. The third was empty except for a chair. The fourth contained an old wooden cradle beneath a sheet. Quentin stopped at its doorway. "That room stays closed." Abigail looked at the sheeted cradle. "Why?" His face went still. "It stays closed." She could have challenged him. Instead, she nodded. Eli chose the narrow room. Ruthie refused to sleep alone, so Abigail placed her in the larger room and lay beside her until the child's breathing softened. When Abigail opened the door again, Quentin stood in the hallway holding a lamp. "I'll sleep downstairs," he said. "This is your house. It is yours now too." "That does not answer me. I sleep badly. I sleep badly." His gaze moved to the scar on her cheek. She did not cover it. "Take the room," he said. "There is a bolt inside." He placed the lamp on the floor between them and walked away. Abigail listened to his steps descend the stairs. Later, when the wind pressed against the windows and the house settled around unfamiliar breathing, she rose and went downstairs for water. Quentin sat near the fireplace in his shirt sleeves, cleaning his revolver by lamplight. His gun belt lay on the floor beyond his reach. An old red neckerchief was spread across his knee. One corner had turned nearly black with a stain that no washing had removed. He looked up. "Couldn't sleep?" "No, neither could I." She went to the water bucket. It was empty. Quentin saw her lift it. "I forgot. You have lived here 6 years, 7, and you still forget water. No one drinks at night but me. Children do." He set aside the revolver. "I'll fetch it. It is freezing." "Yes, I can wait." They cannot. He put on his boots without socks, took the bucket, and stepped into the dark. Abigail stood beside the open door until he returned. The water sloshed silver beneath the moonlight. By the end of the first week, the house had begun to sound different. A kettle whistled before dawn. Eli's boots thumped down the stairs. Ruthie sang one line from a hymn over and over while gathering eggs from 2 surviving hens Abigail discovered roosting in the loft. Quentin had believed the fox killed them all. The hens had simply moved beyond his attention. Abigail scrubbed the pantry shelves with lye water, inventoried every sack and jar, and found weevils in half the cornmeal. She made a list of what the ranch needed before winter and left it beside Quentin's coffee. He read it standing up. "Too much," he said. "Then choose what you want to go without." He looked down the list. 3 sacks of flour. 5 men eat in the bunkhouse. 4 more ride in twice a week. Eli is growing. Ruthie hides biscuits in her apron because she still believes meals my stock. Quentin's eyes moved toward the yard where Ruthie was feeding crumbs to the hens. 4 sacks, he said. 5. He looked at Abigail. She looked back. 5, he said. She also found that Silas Vane's feed tallies did not match the number of cattle in the winter pasture. When she asked about it, Silas leaned against the kitchen door. "Ranch business is not apron work." Abigail continued adding figures in the ledger. "Numbers do not care what I wear. You think you can ride in here and take over. I came in a wagon." His smile thinned. Quentin entered behind him carrying a saddle. Silas straightened. "Something wrong." Abigail turned the ledger around. "Your October feed account lists 32 sacks of grain delivered from Loman's mill." "That's right. There are 17 empty grain sacks in the barn. Some tier, not 15. Silas glanced at Quentin. "You letting her question me?" Quentin set the saddle down. She asked a question. "You have trusted me 6 years. Then answering should be easy." Silas' pale eyes hardened. "Rats got into the storehouse. We burned what's spoiled. Next time," Abigail said, "record the loss. There won't be a next time." "No," she replied. "There will not." When Silas left, Quentin stood over the ledger. "You think he's stealing? I think either grain has learned to walk or someone is carrying it. You have been here 8 days. I learned accounts before I learned pie crust. He rode with me from Texas. Then perhaps you have trusted him too long to see him clearly. Quentin's face closed. Abigail immediately understood she had touched something older than Silas Vane. Quentin picked up the saddle. You have not known either of us long enough to judge. No, she said, but I know how to subtract. He walked out. That evening his coffee went cold on the table. Abigail did not warm it. The next morning she found a new broom leaning beside the pantry door. No note, no apology. She used it anyway. Winter settled early over Cottonwood Pass. Snow filled the wagon ruts and silenced the long slopes above the ranch. Quentin and his men brought cattle down from the high range, riding home after dark with ice stiffening their coats. Abigail learned the sound of each horse in the yard. She could tell Solitude's careful steps from the younger animals, and she learned that Quentin always paused at the barn door before coming inside. At first she believed he was knocking snow from his boots. Then she realized he was listening. He listened for the children, for laughter, for crying, for silence that might mean the house had emptied again. Abigail began leaving the lamp turned high in the front window. She never mentioned it, neither did he. She taught Eli to split kindling with a short-handled hatchet. Quentin taught him how to approach a frightened horse without looking it directly in the eye. Why? Eli asked. Because fear dislikes being watched. People too. Quentin glanced toward the kitchen window where Abigail was rolling dough. Sometimes, Ruthie built nests for the hens inside the old smokehouse. She named the red one Duchess and the speckled one Reverend Sloane. Why the Reverend? Quentin asked. Because she looks worried. Quentin made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was the first one Abigail heard from him. The sound startled him more than anyone. Days became measured by work. Abigail mended shirts beneath the lamp, while Quentin repaired tack. Eli recited sums at the table. Ruthie slept with her cheek against Abigail's skirt. Sometimes one of the ranch hands came in for coffee and stopped speaking when he found a woman in the room. After a while, they stopped finding it strange. Abigail introduced yeast starter into the bunkhouse kitchen and showed the cook how to keep it alive. She traded 2 jars of preserved peaches for a milk goat. She cleaned the upstairs room with a narrow bed and made it into a place where Eli could read. She hung flour sack curtains at the kitchen windows. She gathered dried rose hips for tea and rendered bear grease into salve for cracked hands. When Quentin returned one evening with a split knuckle, she set a basin on the table. See? It's nothing. Thin sitting will not harm it, he said. She washed the wound. His hand was large and heavily calloused, with an old break along the smallest finger. How did this happen? She asked. Gate chain. The new chain or the one Silas said he replaced in August. Quentin looked at her. The old one. Then he charged you for iron he did not buy? His jaw tightened. Abigail wrapped the knuckle in clean cloth. You might be angry with me, she said, but you should be angrier with the man stealing from your table. Quentin watched her tie the bandage. Silas saved my life. That does not give him ownership of the rest of it. His fingers moved once beneath hers. She felt the strength in them and the careful effort not to close his hand around hers. What happened in Texas? She asked. He withdrew. Nothing that belongs in this kitchen. She gathered the bloody water. Everything belonging to a man eventually enters his kitchen. He stared at the fire. She did not press him again. 3 days later, he rode to the winter pasture without Silas. When he returned, he brought 2 feed sacks stamped with Loman's mill mark. They had been hidden beneath a tarp in an abandoned line shack. He placed them on the porch in front of Silas. Explain, Silas S. Knees moved from the sacks to Abigail, standing in the doorway. Ask your wife. She seems to have an answer for everything. I asked you. Silas spat into the snow. I traded some grain for whiskey and tobacco. Men work better when they have comforts. You charged the ranch full price. I kept riders loyal. You kept them drinking. Silas' expression changed. "You sound like your brother." Quentin went very still. Abigail saw his right hand lower toward the gun. Silas saw it too, and smiled. "There he is." Quentin's fingers hovered above the grip. The yard seemed to narrow around them. Eli watched from the barn. Ruthie stood behind Abigail, holding her skirt. Quentin looked at the children. Then he removed his gun belt. He laid it across the porch rail. "You're finished here," he said. Silas blinked. "What? Take your horse and wages? Leave before dark? After all we did? After all we did? You think this woman changed what you are?" Quentin's face was pale beneath the weathering. "No. She reminded me I could choose." Silas' gaze turned to Abigail. "This ranch will bury you." Abigail stepped onto the porch. "Then you had best leave before the ground freezes." Silas rode out an hour later. Quentin watched from the barn until the man disappeared beyond the cottonwoods. That night, he did not come in for supper. Abigail found him in the tack room sitting on an overturned bucket. The old red neckerchief lay in his hands. A lantern burned above him. She remained near the door. "Eli saved you a biscuit." "I'm not hungry." "He saved it anyway." Quentin rubbed the dark stain in the cloth with his tomb. "My brother wore this." Abigail said nothing. "Daniel Mercer, younger than me by 4 years. Better with horses, better with people." The lantern flame shifted. "We drove cattle north out of Texas. Near Red Draw, 3 men tried to take the remuda. Silas wanted to chase them. Daniel said the weather was turning and we should let the horses go. You chased them." "Ah, yes." The word fell hard. "Daniel followed because he would not let me go alone. One thief circled back, shot him through the belly." Abigail looked at the stain. "I killed the 3 of them." Was one reaching? Quentin lifted his eyes. The last one was on his knees. The tack room seemed to lose its air. Quentin looked back at the neckerchief. Silas told everyone the man had a pistol in his sleeve. "Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I never looked." Abigail crossed the room and sat on a grain box opposite him. "You have looked every night since." His face tightened. "I brought Daniel home wrapped in a wagon sheet. My mother opened the door, saw me alive, and understood before I spoke. She never said she blamed me." "That can be worse." "I asked, what happened to her?" "She died the next spring, and your father." "Before Daniel, Silas came with me. He said a man should not be alone after blood, but he kept you inside it." Quentin's gaze sharpened. "You see too much." "No. I notice what is left where people think no one will look." He folded the neckerchief carefully. "I should have let Silas go years ago. You owed him gratitude, not blindness. I nearly drew on him today, but you did not. I wanted to, but you did not." He looked at her across the lantern light. "Those that make me good?" "No." The answer surprised him. Abigail leaned forward. "It makes you responsible for the next choice." For a long time, neither spoke. Then Quentin held out the red neckerchief. "Can it be clean?" She took it from him. "The stain was too old." "I can wash it," she said. "I cannot promise what will remain." That is more than I could do. It was the closest thing to trust he had yet placed in her hands. Near Christmas, Ruthie became ill. It began with a cough after she slipped through the ice beside the hen house. By evening, fever burned beneath her skin. Abigail stripped the wet clothes from her, wrapped her in blankets, and brewed willow bark tea. Quentin stood in the doorway. "What does she need?" "Dr. Bell, the pass is nearly closed." "She needs him." Quentin was already reaching for his coat. Abigail caught his sleeve. "You will not make town before dark." "I know. The ridge road will be ice." "I know. You could be killed." Ruthie coughed from the bed, a deep wet sound that frightened them both. Quentin looked at Abigail's hand on his arm. "She needs him," he said. It was her own sentence returned. He rode into the storm. The wind shook the house until midnight. Abigail sat beside Ruthie with a cool cloth. Eli refused to sleep and kept the stove fed without being asked. Every few minutes he went to the window. "He will come back," Abigail said. "How do you know?" She had no answer. At 2 in the morning, hoofbeats struck the frozen yard. Quentin entered carrying Dr. Bell on his back because the older man had fallen and injured his ankle crossing the pass. Quentin's face was crusted with ice. Blood ran from his hairline. He lowered the doctor near the stove. "See the girl first." Dr. Bell listened to Ruthie's chest, mixed medicine from his bag, and ordered hot steam and mustard cloths. By dawn the fever broke. Ruthie opened her eyes. "Mr. Mercer." Quentin sat on the floor beside the wall, too exhausted to rise. "Yes, your face is bleeding." "So it is. You should wash." "Yes, ma'am." She fell asleep again. Abigail knelt before him with a basin. The cut at his hairline was shallow. His hands were not. 2 fingernails were torn. The skin across his palms had split from hauling Dr. Bell up the last icy slope after the horses could go no farther. "You walk?" Abigail whispered, part way, carrying a grown man. "He complained less after I threatened to leave him." Dr. Bell called weakly from the chair. "He is lying." "I complained the entire distance." Abigail smiled before she could stop herself. Quentin looked at her smile as though he had discovered fire. She cleaned the blood from his face. This time, when her fingers brushed his temple, he did not pull away. On Christmas morning, the snow stopped. Abigail made apple cakes from the last dried fruit in the pantry. Eli carved Ruthie a horse from pine. Ruthie gave Quentin a bundle wrapped in newspaper. Inside was one of the blue swallows copied from Abigail's cedar trunk and cut from a scrap of cloth. The wings were uneven. One side had been sewn backward. "What is it?" Quentin asked. "A bird. I see. It remembers home." He looked across the table at Abigail. "Does it? That is what our mother said." Abigail answered. Ruthie pointed toward his coat. "You put it in the pocket so you remember." Quentin folded the cloth bird once and slid it into the inside pocket over his heart. "I will." After the children slept, Abigail found a small package beside her coffee cup. Inside was a brass key. "The storehouse," Quentin said. "I already know where the key hangs." "This is another." "Why?" "So you do not have to ask." She closed her fingers around it. It was not jewelry. It was better. In January, Harlan Pike sent a letter. The envelope carried the bank seal. Quentin placed it beside Abigail's plate without opening it. She read while the breakfast porridge cooled. Notice of foreclosure. The bank claimed her father had signed a second note for $1,200, secured not only by the fee store in town, but by any property acquired through Abigail's marriage. Payment was demanded by March 1st. Quentin read the paper twice. "The signature yours?" At the bottom, beneath her father's name, was Abigail's. "It resembles mine. Did you sign it?" "No. Can you prove that?" "My father died 6 months before the date written there." Quentin's eyes hardened. "Then Pike forged it." "The county clerk might say the date was copied incorrectly." "Who was clerk then?" "Harlan Pike's brother-in-law." Quentin folded the notice. "He is trying to take Black Horse. He wanted it before I came." "Why?" "The railroad survey." Quentin looked toward the south window. Beyond the barns, a broad strip of level ground crossed his lower pasture. Abigail understood. "A spur line. He knows something." "He usually does." Quentin rose. "Ride to town." "To do what?" "Speak to him." "With your gun?" His silence answered. Abigail stood between him and the door. "If you threaten Harlan Pike, he will make himself the victim. If you strike him, he will make himself a martyr. If you kill him, he will own this ranch before your body cools." "What would you have me do?" "Find the original ledger." "At the bank?" "At my father's store. He kept duplicates beneath the floorboards." "You never told me." I did not trust you. The truth stood between them. Quentin's face showed no anger. Do you now? Abigail looked at the brass storehouse key on its cord around her waist. She thought of Ruthie breathing because Quentin had crossed the frozen pass. She thought of his gun belt lying on the porch while Silas rode away. With some things, she said. His mouth tightened. It was not the answer he wanted. It was the one she could give. They rode to town 2 days later, leaving the children with Dr. Bow's widowed sister at the ranch. Bitterroot Crossing had frozen hard beneath a clear sky. Their breath smoked before them as they entered the square. People stopped to stare. The story of Abigail's marriage had traveled through every kitchen and saloon in the county. Some said Quentin had purchased her. Others said she had bewitched him. A few claimed she slept with a pistol beneath her pillow. No one asked Abigail. Harlan Pike met them at the feast store with Sheriff Alden nearby. You no longer own this building, Pike said. Foreclosure has not been completed, Abigail replied. You abandoned the premises. I married and moved my household. The distinction, my interest, a judge. Quentin stepped close enough that Pike's smile flickered. Abigail touched Quentin's sleeve. He stopped. I require 1 hour inside, she said. Pike shook his head. No. Sheriff Alden shifted uncomfortably. He had known Abigail since childhood and owed Pike money. Quentin looked at him. Sheriff, Alden cleared his throat. Until foreclosure is final, Mrs. Newcomb, might examine her effects. Pike's expression chilled. 1 hour. The store smelled of dust, old grain, and damp wood. The shelves were nearly bare. Abigail went to the back room where Alice's painted home sign still hung above the door. She knelt near the coal stove and pried up the third floorboard. The hollow beneath it was empty. Her breath stopped. No, she whispered. Quentin crouched beside her. What should be there? 3 ledgers. My father's seal. Receipts from every bank payment. Who knew? My father. Me. Pike? He might have guessed. Quentin examined the board. The nailheads were bright. Opened recently. Abigail sat back on her heels. Without the ledgers, she had no proof. Through the front window, Harlan Pike waited across the street, speaking with Hollis Crane. The 7th man. Hollis glanced toward the store and looked away. Abigail rose. She crossed the room, stepped into the street, and walked directly toward him. Hollis. He removed his hat. Mrs. Mercer, Newcomb. Yes. What did Pike tell you before you left the courthouse? Pike interrupted. This is hardly. Quentin stepped between him and Abigail. He said nothing. Pike became silent. Hollis stared at the snow. He said your father's debt was larger than stated. What else? That anyone marrying you would lose his land. Did he offer you something? Hollis' face reddened. No. Abigail waited. Quentin waited. The whole square seemed to wait. Hollis's hand tightened around his hat. $200. Abigail felt no surprise, only a deep, weary confirmation. To walk away? To sign a statement that you had misrepresented your debts? Did the other men receive the same offer? I don't know. You saw him speak to them. Yes. Did you take the money? Hollis looked at her then. Yes. The word came out broken. Pike stepped forward. This conversation is finished. No, Abigail said. It has finally begun. She turned to Sheriff Alden. I accuse Harlan Pike of fraud, forgery, unlawful removal of property, and interference in a marriage contract. The sheriff looked stricken. Abigail, an accusation is not evidence. Hollis Crane is evidence. I will testify, Hollis said quietly. Pike laughed. One cowers guilt against a signed banknote. Abigail looked back at the empty feed store. For the first time since the courthouse wedding, fear entered her with real teeth. If Pike's claim reached a friendly judge, Quentin could lose everything he had built. Because of her, that night at the hotel, Quentin slept in a chair beside the door. Abigail lay awake in the narrow bed, listening to the stove tick. Near dawn, she rose without lighting a lamp. She packed her few clothes into the cedar trunk. The 7 blue swallows moved across the lid beneath her hands. Quentin opened his eyes. "What are you doing?" "I'm returning to the store." "No, I establish residence there before foreclosure. Pike cannot claim I abandoned it. You'll freeze. I have a stove. No wood. I will buy wood with what?" She fastened the brass latch. "I can work at the hotel laundry." Quentin stood. "And the children? They will remain at the ranch until I earn enough to take them elsewhere." His face became unreadable. "You plan to leave them." "I plan to protect them. By leaving. By separating my debt from your property. We are married. It went separate. I will petition for annulment." The words hurt more after she spoke them. Quentin did not move. Abigail lifted the trunk handle. He crossed the room and took it from her. "Give it back." He carried the trunk to the bed. "Quentin." He set it down. Then he opened the lid. Her folded dresses lay inside. Her mother's Bible rested on top. Beneath it was the old apron Ruthie had worn the day of the fire. Quentin closed the lid again. "No one leaves to pay a debt made from lies. You could lose Black Horse." Yes, you say that as though land means nothing. It means plenty. It means plenty." "Then let me go." "No, you promised. You would not lock doors against people leaving." "I'm not locking the door." He stepped aside, leaving the path clear. Abigail stared at him. "What are you doing?" "Choosing you again." The room seemed to contract around them. "No grand promise," he said. "No gun, no courthouse crowd. You can walk through that door, but I will not help you disappear because Pike taught you to believe you are costly." Abigail's eyes burned. "You do not know what he taught me. Then tell me." She turned away. For years, she had carried the truth inside the scar, where no one could see it without seeing the wound first. "The fire began in the feed store cellar," she said. "A lamp fell. My father had been drinking. Eli and Ruthie were asleep in the back room." Quentin remained silent. "I carried Ruthie out, went back for Eli." The stairs collapsed. Her hand lifted to her cheek. "My father was near the door. He could have helped." He ran. Quentin's breathing changed. He returned after the roof fell. Told everyone he had tried to save us. I never corrected him. He was already ruined by whiskey and debt. 6 months later, he died in the river. You think he jumped? I think he stopped fighting the current. The first tear escaped before Abigail could prevent it. When Pike showed me the notes, I believed them. My father had lied about everything else. Why not money? I worked 8 years paying debts I could not prove were his, because I believed surviving the fire made me responsible for what remained. Quentin came closer. He did not touch her. You went back into a burning building. They were children. You went back. What else could I do? What your father did. The sentence was gentle. That made it unbearable. Abigail covered her face. Quentin waited until she lowered her hands. Then he lifted the cedar trunk and carried it away from the door. He placed it at the foot of the bed. "Stay until morning," he said. It was not a command. It was not forever. It was enough. They returned to Black Horse and began searching every surviving record on the ranch. Abigail compared cattle tallies, feed purchases, bank drafts, and tax receipts. Quentin rode to neighboring spreads and asked questions he had once been too proud to ask. Eli sorted old papers by year. Ruthie brought everyone cold biscuits and insisted this made her part of the investigation. In the second week, Eli found a mark in one of Silas Van's tally books. A small double circle appeared beside cattle sold through the southern holding pen. "What is that?" he asked. Quentin took the book. "Daniel's mark, your brother? He used it on personal stock." Abigail moved closer. The mark appeared beside 12 sales made after Daniel's death. Each payment had been deposited through Holland Pike's bank. The totals were small enough to escape notice alone. Together they amounted to more than $3,000. Silas and Pike were selling cattle outside the ranch books, Abigail said. Quentin's expression darkened. For years, can Silas prove it? If he is alive. They found him in a mining camp near Elk Ridge. Quentin rode alone despite Abigail's argument. He returned 4 days later with a bullet crease along his ribs and Silas' vein tied to a second horse. Abigail ran into the yard as Quentin dismounted. "You are hurt?" "Not badly. You always say that." Silas slid from the saddle, landed hard, and cursed. His left eye was swollen shut. "Did you do that?" Abigail asked Quentin. "He fell." Silas laughed bitterly. Into his fist. Quentin looked at him. "After you fired." Silas was carrying a leather document pouch beneath his coat. Inside were letters from Harlan Pike, payment records, forged brand certificates, a copy of the false note bearing Abigail's name, and one page written by Abigail's father. "Mr. Pike, I will not sign what you have prepared. My daughter has carried enough of my failures. The lower pasture at Black Horse will be worth 10 times your offer when the railway survey becomes known. I want no part in taking it from Mercer." The letter had never been sent. Silas had kept it as protection against Pike. Abigail read the lines twice. Her father had failed her in many ways, but at the end, he had refused this. A grief she had believed settled shifted inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet. Something less clean and more human. Quentin watched her fold the page. "You all right?" "No." He nodded. He understood that some answers did not heal. They merely changed the shape of the wound. The foreclosure hearing was set for the first Monday in March. The entire county seemed to come. Farmers filled the courthouse benches. Ranch hands crowded the rear wall. Town women stood along the windows. The 7 men who had walked away from Abigail were all present. Summoned after Hollis Crane admitted Pike had paid each of them. 2 denied taking money. 3 confessed. 1 claimed he had accepted only train fare. The 6th was still drunk. Harlan Pike entered in a dark blue suit with Abigail's father's silver watch shining across his vest. He had hired a lawyer from Boise. Quentin wore his black coat and gun belt. Abigail wore the same gray dress she had worn on their wedding day. The burn scar along her cheek showed plainly. She had considered covering it with powder. Instead, she pinned her hair away from it. When the judge entered, the room rose. For 3 hours, figures were read aloud. Abigail testified regarding the false signature, the missing ledgers, the feed accounts, and the cattle sales. Her voice remained steady even when Pike's lawyer asked whether desperation for marriage had affected her judgment. "No," she said. "Yet 7 men declined to marry you." "That is correct." "And the 8th man was a known killer." Quentin's chair scraped. Abigail did not look at him. "He was the first who answered my questions honestly." The lawyer smiled. "Mrs. Newcomb, do you expect this court to believe that a woman publicly rejected 7 times happened to marry the one wealthy landowner whose property Mr. Pike supposedly wished to seize?" "No." The smile widened. Abigail continued. "I expect the court to believe documents, dates, bank deposits, brand records, and the testimony of the man Mr. Pike paid to falsify them." Silas was brought forward under guard. His testimony lasted an hour. He admitted stealing grain, selling cattle, forging documents, and removing the Newcomb ledgers. He admitted Pike had ordered him to burn them. "Why did you keep the letters?" the judge asked. Silas looked toward Quentin. "Because I knew one day Mercer might decide to become the man his brother thought he was." Pike's lawyer objected. The judge allowed the answer to stand. Then Harlan Pike rose. His control had begun to crack. "You all sit there pretending she is some injured saint," he said, pointing at Abigail. "You saw her on that porch. 7 men saw what she was and walked away." The judge struck the bench. Pike ignored him. "She brought debt, 2 hungry children, a scarred face, and a dead drunk's name. Mercer took her because fear has always been the only way he could make people stay. Quentin stood. Every deputy in the room watched his hand. Abigail saw the old reflex move through him, the tightening shoulder, the slight turn of his body, the world narrowing toward violence. Quentin unbuckled his gun belt. He laid it on the rail, just as he had on their wedding day. Then he removed a folded deed from his coat. "I signed Black Horse Ranch to the county this morning," he said. Abigail turned sharply. "What?" The courtroom erupted. The judge demanded quiet. Quentin placed the deed on the clerk's table. "If the court finds any portion of Abigail Newcomb's debt lawful, sell my land and pay it." Abigail stared at him. The lower pasture alone was worth more than every claim Pike had invented. The whole ranch was Quentin's life. Daniel's cattle had built it. His mother's last letter had been written there. Every fence, barn, and well carried years of labor. "You cannot," Abigail whispered. Quentin looked at her. "I already did." Pike laughed once, too loudly. "There, you see? She has cost him everything." Quentin faced him. "No," the word quieted the room. "She found what you stole. She kept my riders fed when you meant to empty the barns. She saw theft where I saw loyalty. She saved my ranch before I offered it." He looked toward the 7 men seated along the wall. "You walked away because a banker told you she was costly." Then he looked at Abigail. "I knew the cost." His voice roughened. "I choose her. No one moved. I choose Eli and Ruthie. I choose the scar. I choose every debt that is hers. And I reject every debt built from shame. If the ranch pays for that truth, let it." Abigail could not breathe. The judge examined the deed, then the letters, then the forged note. He ruled before sunset. The signature was false. The foreclosure claim was void. The Newcomb store was returned to Abigail. Harlan Pike was remanded for trial on fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and theft. The deed to Black Horse Ranch was not recorded. The county clerk handed it back to Quentin. Quentin did not take it. He looked at Abigail. "It was signed to protect your property," the clerk explained. "Since no lawful debt exists, the transfer might be withdrawn." Abigail picked up the deed. She folded it once. Then she placed it inside her coat. "I will keep it," she said. Quentin's brow lowered. "Why?" "To remind you never to give away our home without asking me." A ripple of laughter moved through the courtroom. Quentin's mouth shifted at one corner. "Yes, Mama." Outside, evening had turned the snow pale gold. The town gathered on the courthouse steps, just as it had on the day 7 men walked away. Hollis Crane approached Abigail with his hat in his hands. "I owe you more than an apology. Yes, I was a coward. Yes." He winced. "I hope someday you might forgive me." Abigail looked at him for a moment. "I hope someday you become a man who does not require forgiveness from the next woman." Hollis bowed his head. The other rejected suitors kept their distance. Quentin came down the steps carrying his gun belt over one shoulder. Ruthie ran from Dr. Bell's wagon and threw herself against his legs. "Did we lose the house?" "No." "The hens?" "No." "My bet?" "No." She looked worried. "Abigail." Quentin lifted his eyes to where Abigail stood. "No," he said. "We did not lose her." Eli approached more carefully. "Did you shoot anyone?" "No." "Did you want to?" "Yes." Eli considered this. Was the gun the last answer? Quentin looked at the belt over his shoulder. "Wasn't an answer at all." Eli nodded with solemn approval. They returned to Black Horse beneath a sky clear enough to show every star. Spring came late that year. Snow remained in the fence shadows until April. Then the creeks swelled, the cottonwoods turned green, and Ruthie's hens began laying more eggs than the household could eat. Abigail reopened the Newcomb feed store with a hired manager and used the back room as a school twice each week. She taught ranch children figures, reading, and how to recognize dishonest sums. Eli grew 2 inches and learned to saddle solitude without being reminded to tighten the cinch twice. Ruthie built a proper hen fence with Quentin's help. He followed her instructions, mostly. The house changed one object at a time. Clean curtains moved in the kitchen windows. Boots lined the porch instead of lying wherever they fell. A jar of mountain flowers appeared on the table. Coffee waited on the stove when Quentin returned late. His coat hung beside Abigail's shawl. The closed upstairs room remained closed through winter. One warm evening in May, Quentin carried the sheeted cradle out to the porch. Abigail found him sanding the old wood. She sat beside him. "You opened the room. What will you do with it?" "Ruthie says her dolls need somewhere to sleep." Abigail touched the worn cradle rail. "Is that all?" Quentin looked toward the pasture. "Maybe not forever." Her hand became still. He did not reach for her at once. He had learned that silence could be offered rather than imposed. Abigail turned her palm upward on the porch board between them. Quentin placed his hand in it. The movement was careful, almost uncertain. She closed her fingers around his. "You are still poor at apologies," she said. "Yes, and you leave wet coats on chairs." "You frightened the new school teacher by staring at him." "He was staring at you. He was asking about chalk." "He took too long." Abigail smiled. Quentin looked at her as he had on Christmas morning, still surprised that warmth could appear and remain. "I love you," he said. The words were plain. No speech, no courthouse crowd. Abigail's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "I know," she said. His tongue moved across her knuckles. "That isn't the same as saying it." "Nah," he waited. She let him. "I love you too, Quentin Mercer." He bent and kissed her. It was not the kiss of a man claiming what he had won. It was the kiss of a man being allowed to come home. Near sunset, Ruthie called them inside for supper. The family gathered around the rough pine table. Eli brought the bread. Ruthie spilled milk and wiped it up before anyone could help. Quentin carved the roast. Abigail poured coffee into his tin cup and set it beside his plate. At the far end of the room, her cedar trunk rested beneath the window. The 7 blue swallows still crossed the lid, but beneath them was something new. Sometime during the spring, Quentin had carved a small black horse into the wood. It stood beneath the painted birds with its head lifted, as though watching them circle home. Abigail had discovered it that morning. She had said nothing. After supper, when the children were asleep and the stove glowed low, she carried the little cloth swallow Ruthie had made at Christmas to Quentin's coat. The uneven bird was worn from months inside his pocket. Abigail threaded a needle and sewed it into the lining over his heart so it could never be lost. Quentin stood quietly while she worked. Outside, the repaired hen fence held. The cattle moved through new grass. Curtains breathed at the open window, and the last light rested on the 7 swallows, the black horse, and the brass latch of a trunk that had once waited beside a woman everyone expected to abandon. Some people remembered that day because 7 men walked away. But that was not the part worth carrying. The part worth remembering was the man who laid down his gun, the woman who refused to lower her face, and the home they built after choosing became more than a word spoken before a crowd. It became coffee kept warm, a lamp in the window, a child breathing safely through the night, a hand offered on a porch and not pulled away. And when the swallows returned each spring to Cottonwood Pass, Abigail Newcomb would sometimes stand beside Quentin Mercer at sunset and watch them wheel above the ranch. Neither of them wondered where the birds were going. They knew they were going home.